The message came through at 6:52 on a Tuesday morning, before my alarm even went off. Unknown number. I almost swiped it away. Then I read the preview and sat straight up in bed. This is Diane from Colton and Reed Legal. I emailed you a document by mistake last night. Please delete it without reading. I'm so sorry for the confusion. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand. Sure enough, sitting in my inbox was an email from dcrawford@coltonreed.com, timestamped 11:47 p.m. the night before. The subject line read, "Draft quitclaim deed transfer Sawyer property due not forward." My name is not Sawyer, but my brother's last name is. And so is mine. I opened the attachment before she could do anything about it. It took me 3 full reads to understand what I was looking at. A legal deed. My grandfather's lake house up in Crestwood, the one he left to both me and my brother when he passed 2 years ago. My name was on it. My signature was on it. A signature I had never written. The transfer date listed was 9 days from that morning. Everything, the full property, the mineral rights, the dock access, was being moved entirely into my brother's name. Mine was being removed completely. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a long time, just staring at the blue light of that screen. My brother had been living with me for 4 months. He showed up at my door in late winter with 2 duffel bags and a story about his landlord raising rent overnight. I'd said, sure, you can crash here a few weeks. 4 months later, his girlfriend Marissa was basically living here too. Her things were in my bathroom. Her leftovers were in my fridge. But she was his girlfriend, and he was my brother, and I figured it was just a rough patch they were getting through. I thought I understood the situation. I didn't understand anything. I forwarded that email to myself 3 times. Saved the attachment to 2 different cloud drives. Then I texted the unknown number back. No worries. Already deleted. Have a good day. Diane from Colton and Reed never replied. I got up, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over the neighbor's roof. My brother was asleep down the hall. Marissa was probably next to him. Both of them completely unbothered, completely certain I had no idea what was coming. I kept my face neutral the entire morning. When he stumbled out around 9, I handed him a mug and asked if he wanted eggs. He said, "Yeah, thanks man," and sat down at the counter scrolling his phone like it was any other day. I made the eggs. I made conversation. I smiled when he made a joke about traffic. And the whole time, something inside me went very, very quiet. Not angry. Not panicked. Just cold and focused in a way I had never felt before in my life. Because I already had a plan. My grandfather's lake house in Crestwood was the one thing in our family nobody ever fought about. It was the place we went every 4th of July when we were kids. The place where my grandfather taught us both to fish off that rickety dock at 5 in the morning. When he passed, his attorney told us the property was split equally 50-50. Me and my brother, no conditions. I had assumed that meant something. I had assumed blood meant something. What I didn't know, and only found out 3 days later when I hired my own attorney, was that 6 months earlier my brother had convinced me to sign a document I thought was a co-ownership clarification for tax filing purposes. He'd handed it to me at a family dinner, explained it in about 90 seconds, told me our grandfather's estate attorney recommended it. I'd skimmed it, trusted him completely, and signed it. What it actually did was authorize him to act as the primary managing owner of the property. It wasn't a full transfer, but it was the foundation for one. And now, with Colton and Reed drafting the quitclaim deed, he was 9 days from finishing the job. The attorney I hired was named Patricia Oze. Quiet office, no framed certificates on the wall, just a cactus and a legal pad. She read everything I showed her in about 12 minutes without saying a word. Then she looked up. "You caught this early," she said. "That's the only reason we have options." I asked what kind of options. She uncapped her pen. "The kind that leave a mark." We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. The document I'd signed 6 months ago could be challenged. I had signed under false pretense, without independent legal counsel, without any disclosure of its actual function. The quitclaim deed being drafted at Colton and Reed was fraudulent because it carried a forged signature, mine, on a transfer I had never agreed to or been present for. Patricia told me to gather everything, any texts about the property, any emails, any conversations I could document. She told me not to confront my brother. She told me not to change anything about my behavior at home. And then she told me to get a voice recorder app on my phone. I went home that evening and cooked dinner. Pasta, nothing fancy. My brother came in from wherever he'd been, Marissa right behind him, and they sat down at my table and ate my food and talked about maybe taking a weekend trip up to Crestwood in the spring. To air the place out, my brother said. Maybe fix up the dock. Their dock now, the way they saw it. My brother's dock. 9 days from being only his. I said that sounded like a great idea. I asked if he wanted more bread. That night I stayed up until 2 in the morning going through every text thread between me and my brother going back 18 months. I found what Patricia needed. A thread from 8 months ago where I'd specifically said the lakehouse should stay in both our names until we agreed otherwise. His reply: obviously, nobody's going anywhere with that. I screenshot it. I found another exchange where he'd asked me to sign that tax form, and I'd asked if I should have an attorney look at it and he'd said, nah, it's just administrative, estate stuff, don't overthink it. I screenshot that too. I also went into our shared family cloud folder, the one my grandfather had set up years ago with old photos and property records, and downloaded every document that had both our names on it. The original deed, the probate paperwork, all of it. Then I created a new email account, one my brother had never seen, and sent Patricia everything in a single, compressed file at 2:18 inches the morning. She replied at 2:31. Still awake, apparently. This is more than enough. I'll have a motion ready by Friday. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a while. The house was quiet. I could hear Marissa laughing softly at something on her phone down the hall, the sound drifting under the door. 4 months of this. 4 months of me buying groceries and paying utilities and treating them like guests while they were running a clock down on everything my grandfather built. I didn't sleep much that night. But I wasn't angry anymore. Angry felt like the wrong word. I felt like a man who had just realized the game was already over, and he was the only one in the room who knew it. I started paying closer attention after that. I was careful about it, nothing obvious, nothing that would tip them off. But I started noticing things I'd explained away before. Marissa taking photos of the Crestwood property documents I kept in a binder on the office shelf. My brother asking casually if I had a copy of the original deed just in case. Him coming home once with mud on his boots on a day he'd said he was meeting a friend downtown, and Crestwood being a 90-minute drive each way. I started keeping notes. Dates, times, details. One evening I came home early from work and heard them talking in the kitchen before they realized I was inside. Marissa's voice, low and certain. He's not going to do anything even if he finds out. You know how he is? He hates confrontation. My brother, the deed goes through in 8 days. Just relax. Marissa, I'm relaxed. I just want to make sure the notary isn't going to be a problem. My brother, she's handled. Stop worrying. I stood in the entryway with my keys in my hand and breathed through my nose, slow and even. Then I set my bag down, walked into the kitchen, and apologized for startling them. My brother laughed it off. Marissa smiled at me like she always did, warm and easy and completely fake. I asked what they wanted for dinner. That weekend I did something I hadn't planned. I drove up to Crestwood alone. I told them I had a work thing, drove 2 hours north, and sat on the dock my grandfather built with his own hands for about an hour. The water was cold and gray and the trees hadn't come back yet from winter. I just sat there with a cup of coffee and thought about him. About every morning we'd sat in that same spot, and how he'd always told me that the land you stand on matters more than most people realize. Take care of what's yours, he used to say. And don't let anyone take it quietly. I drove back with something settled in my chest. Patricia filed the emergency legal motion on Friday, just like she said. I wasn't there for the filing. I was at work, in a meeting, nodding along to a quarterly review presentation like I was paying attention. By the time I got out, she had texted, done. Monday morning we move. I went home Friday evening and picked up dinner. Thai food, my brother's favorite. I bought extra of the curry he liked and sat down with them like it was any normal Friday night. My brother was in a good mood. He'd been in a good mood all week, lighter somehow, easier, like a man counting down to a finish line. We watched a game together afterward, him on the couch. Marissa with her feet tucked under her on the armchair, and I sat on the other end of the couch and watched them being comfortable in my home, and I didn't say a single word about any of it. Saturday I played it completely normal. Sunday I told them I had some early calls on Monday and would be up before them, not to worry about it. Monday came. I was dressed by 7. Dark jeans, plain shirt, nothing that looked like I was preparing for anything. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open to something meaningless. My brother came out around 8:30, surprised to find me still there. I told him I'd moved my calls to the afternoon. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. Marissa appeared about 20 minutes later, already dressed, which was unusual for a Monday morning. She was in a good mood too. They were both performing some version of casual that they'd clearly agreed on. I recognized it because I'd been doing the same thing for 2 weeks. At 9 on the dot, the doorbell rang. My brother looked at me. You expecting someone? Just a few people, I said. Why don't you both sit down? Patricia stepped in first, in a charcoal blazer, carrying a leather document case. Behind her was a process server in a plain gray jacket, and behind him a notary public I'd arranged separately. My brother went completely still when he saw them. Marissa's hand tightened around her coffee mug. Patricia looked at me. Ready? I turned to them. You're going to want to sit for this. My brother tried to laugh it off. What is this? Some kind of joke? The process server stepped forward and set a document on the counter between them without saying anything. My brother looked down at it. His face changed. Patricia spoke quietly and without drama. You're being served notice of an emergency injunction halting the transfer of the Sawyer Lakehouse property in Crestwood, effective immediately. Additionally, you're receiving notice of a civil fraud filing related to the unauthorized preparation of a quitclaim deed bearing a forged signature. Marissa set her mug down. Her voice came out sharp and fast. That's insane. He signed the management authorization himself. He did, Patricia said. Under false representation, without disclosure of its function, and without independent legal counsel. Courts tend to have opinions about that. My brother stared at me. His jaw was tight. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how long I'd known it, whether there was still a play left to make. There wasn't. I slid a folder across the counter toward him. Inside was a printed copy of the email. Diane from Colton and Reed had sent me by mistake. His face went gray. I didn't want to drag this out. I didn't want a scene. So I said it plainly. The property stays in both our names, exactly as grandfather intended. Any further attempt to alter the deed or access the property without my written agreement will result in criminal fraud charges, which Patricia is prepared to file this week. The notary who prepared that deed has already been contacted by our attorney. My brother's voice finally came out, quieter than I'd ever heard it. You were never supposed to see that email. I know, I said. We didn't say anything for a few seconds. Marissa started to speak and I raised one hand. There's one more thing, I said. I picked up my phone and opened the audio file. 8 seconds of Marissa's voice, clear as anything. He's not going to do anything even if he finds out. You know how he is. He hates confrontation. Then my brother's voice, the deed goes through in 8 days. I let it play to the end. Then I set the phone down on the counter. I want you both out of this house by 6 o'clock tonight, I said. I'll have your things packed and in the front room by noon. If you're not gone by 6, I'll be calling the police and providing them with everything Patricia has on file, and we'll let the criminal process sort out the timeline instead. Marissa turned to my brother. Say something. He didn't. She looked at me then, and I saw her trying to find the version of me she'd counted on. The one who hated confrontation. The one who would give her brother-in-law one more chance because he was family. The one who'd have that conversation at Christmas, give everyone time to cool off, forgive it quietly because that was easier. That version of me wasn't in the room. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the street while Patricia gathered her things. Behind me, I could hear the two of them whispering to each other, urgent and tight. My brother said her name once, low and frustrated. She said his. Neither of them said mine again. By noon I had 2 boxes and 3 bags sitting by the front door. I was efficient about it. Folded everything neatly, wrapped the breakables. I left a key to the storage unit where my brother had put a few pieces of furniture, set it on top of the box. I wasn't cruel about it. I just wasn't soft about it either. They came back at 4:30. I opened the door and stepped aside. My brother looked at the boxes. He looked at me. He opened his mouth once and then closed it. He picked up a box. Marissa picked up her bags without looking at me. They made 3 trips to his car. I stood in the doorway each time so they knew I was watching, not out of spite but because I wanted them to understand it was over and there was no version of this conversation left to have. When the last bag was in the car, my brother turned back to me from the end of the driveway. His hands were at his sides. He looked older somehow, standing out there in the afternoon light. I didn't want it to go like this, he said. I know, I said. I closed the door. I stood with my back against it for about 30 seconds. The house was completely quiet for the first time in 4 months. No Marissa's shows playing in the background. No my brother's coffee cups left on the counter. No one else's food in my fridge. Just my place, quiet and mine again. I went back to the kitchen and finished the coffee I'd started that morning. That evening, I called Patricia to confirm everything was in order. She told me the civil filing was solid, the injunction was holding, and the fraudulent deed draft had been formally reported to the state bar since a licensed notary had been involved in preparing a document with a forged signature. The notary in question was already cooperating with investigators because she had not been told the signature was forged. She'd been told I was unavailable to sign in person and that my brother had my authorization. She was not going to take that fall quietly. Patricia also told me that Colton and Reed had been notified. The paralegal, Diane, had flagged the situation to the firm's ethics partner the same morning she'd texted me, asking me to delete the email. She'd gotten suspicious when my brother's girlfriend had pushed hard to rush the timeline. The firm had already opened an internal review. I thanked Patricia and asked what happened next. She said, "Now you wait and let the process do what it does." Then she said, "You handled this well. A lot of people would have confronted him the first morning." I told her I almost did. But I figured if I was going to do it, I might as well do it right. She laughed. "Get some sleep," she said. I did something that week I hadn't done in 2 years. I drove back up to Crestwood on a Saturday, just me, and I spent the whole day there. Walked the property line. Fixed a hinge on the boathouse door that had been stiff since last fall. Sat on the dock until the sun went down behind the tree line and turned the whole lake. This deep amber color that I know my grandfather would have called something small and specific, the way he named things. Good fishing light, he always said. This looks like good fishing light. I didn't fish. I just sat there. And I thought about how close I'd come to losing this place without ever knowing I was losing it, and how the only reason I hadn't was a paralegal at a law firm who made a mistake at 11:47 on a Monday night and had the decency to feel bad about it. About a month later, Patricia let me know that Marissa's paralegal certification had been suspended pending the ethics review outcome. She had been the one to push Colton and Reed to fast-track the deed, and internal emails showed she'd been aware the signature was not genuine. She claimed she believed my brother had my permission. Nobody believed that claim, including the ethics board. My brother was facing civil liability. Nothing criminal on his end yet, because he hadn't directly forged anything that had been handled through the notary and Marissa, but the civil exposure was significant. His attorney had already reached out to Patricia twice about settlement. I told Patricia I wasn't interested in settlement. I wanted the property record corrected, the injunction made permanent, and a legally documented acknowledgement that the management authorization I'd signed 6 months ago had been obtained through misrepresentation and was void. That was all I asked for. No money. No punishment beyond what the process was already delivering. Just my name back on what was mine, exactly as my grandfather intended. We got it. All of it, within 6 weeks. There's one thing I did that I haven't mentioned. About 2 weeks after everything happened, I tracked down Diane Crawford's personal email through the Colton and Reed website directory. I sent her a short note. I told her I knew she hadn't been the one to do anything wrong, and that her decision to text me that morning when she didn't have to was the reason I'd caught what I caught when I caught it. I told her I was grateful. I didn't ask her for anything else. She replied 2 days later. She said she'd seen the document and something had felt off about the timeline from the start. She'd been wrestling with it before she sent it and had sent it to what she thought was a colleague's email to get a second opinion. She'd copied the wrong address by 1 letter. She said she was glad it landed where it did. I wrote back, "So am I." On a Friday evening in early spring, I sat on my front porch with a glass of sweet tea and looked at the street going quiet as the light dropped. 4 months of someone else's life pressed into my home, eating my food, sleeping in my guest room, counting down the days until my name disappeared from something my grandfather built. And now none of that was left except the lesson of it. My grandfather used to say that what a man does when he thinks no one is watching tells you everything you need to know about him. I'd watched my brother that whole last month. And I'd also watched myself, what I was when I thought I'd lost and what I was when I knew I could win. I wasn't sure there was much difference, and I took a quiet kind of satisfaction in that. They thought I was the kind of man who signs things without reading them and apologizes for asking too many questions and keeps the peace because he doesn't want to be difficult. And I had been that man. Once, without realizing it. I wasn't anymore. I took a sip of my tea and watched a car go past and thought about next weekend, and driving up to Crestwood, and sitting on that dock in the early morning, with a thermos and the sound of the water moving under the boards the way it always does. My grandfather's dock. My dock now, both of ours, exactly as it was always supposed to be. I hadn't lost it. I'd held on to it. And the best part was they had never once seen it coming.